The fifth step in the decision-making process is to decide the advantages of each alternative. An advantage is a benefit, gain, improvement, or betterment. Specifically, an advantage is a difference between the attributes of two alternatives, such as 2 inches taller, much better flavor, etc. Make sure that you understand the difference between attribute and advantage. An attribute is something we need to know about just one alternative. Therefore, we use non-difference words in the names of attributes, such as long, excellent, etc. An advantage is a difference between the attributes of just two alternatives. Therefore, we use different words in the names of advantages, such as longer, better, etc. Also, remember that a decision must be based on only advantages, and not advantages and disadvantages. That is because a disadvantage of one alternative is an advantage of the other alternative. The names of advantage and disadvantage are two names for the same thing, and including both will lead to double counting. First, select the least preferred attribute in the first factor. You can look at the want criterion up here if you have defined such, to help you determine the least preferred attribute. In this example, for the fuel economy factor, we see the want criterion is the more fuel efficient, the better for the environment. Looking at the different attributes, we see that the alternative with Mercedes C-Class is the least fuel efficient, and hence have the least preferred attribute. Click on that to move to the next part. If there are two attributes that are the same, and also happen to be the least preferred, you will get a message asking you whether you want to mark both as least preferred. If that is the case, click Confirm in order to move to the next part. Secondly, decide the advantages of each of the alternatives. Remember, an advantage is a difference between the attributes of just two alternatives. Therefore, in order to decide the advantage of each alternative, you need to determine the difference between the alternative's attribute and the least preferred attribute selected in the previous part. Notice that the alternative with the least preferred attribute has no advantages compared to the other attributes, and therefore is not listed in this part. Continuing on the same example, we have already selected 22 miles per gallon to be the least preferred attribute. Therefore, the advantage of the Toyota Camry Hybrid alternative is the difference in attributes compared to our least preferred attribute of 22 miles per gallon, and hence the advantage of 18 miles per gallon more. Following the same approach, the alternative with Honda Accord has an attribute of 30 miles per gallon, and hence an advantage of 8 miles per gallon more compared to the least preferred attribute. Finally, select the most important advantage for this factor. If there are two that are the same, select only one. This part might be subjective, but you can invite your colleagues to collaborate on the decision in order to come to an agreement. You can invite collaborators using Add Collaborator in the action box. In our example, the advantage of Toyota is that it drives 18 miles per gallon more compared to Mercedes, while the advantage of Honda is that it drives 8 miles per gallon more compared to Mercedes. Since we have stated that the more fuel efficient the better for the environment, and the difference matters for us, it's reasonable that the most important advantage for the fuel economy factor is 18 miles per gallon more, and we select that as the most important advantage. After completing the three parts for the first factor, continue on to the next factor by clicking on Decide the advantage for the following factor, or by clicking on each factor tab in the top menu. Remember to complete all the steps. Please proceed to step number 6 to decide the importance of advantages after completing this step.